I saw my friends die, all of them, and I was just a soldier. The words came out in perfect German, flawless accent, military precision, the kind of German spoken in 1944, not in modern classrooms. Ethan was 6 years old. He had been blind since birth. He had never seen a war photograph, never watched a history documentary, never heard his parents speak anything but English. Yet at 3:14 in the morning, he sat upright in his bed, hands trembling, reciting coordinates of a battlefield that existed 80 years ago. His mother stood frozen in the doorway, her phone recording, her hands shaking so violently the footage would later be almost unwatchable. Ethan's eyes, clouded white from congenital blindness, stared directly at her, through her, past her, at something only he could see. He whispered one more thing before falling silent. They're still there, all of them, waiting. Before we continue, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. The Richardson family moved to their home in rural Pennsylvania 3 months before everything changed. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quieter life for Ethan, away from the overwhelming sounds of the city. The house was old, built in the 1920s, with thick stone walls and narrow hallways that seemed to swallow light. Sarah Richardson noticed it first. The way certain rooms felt heavier than others. The way the temperature would drop suddenly in the upstairs corridor, even in summer. But she said nothing. She convinced herself it was just an old house settling. Old houses did that. They made sounds, they had drafts, they had history. What she couldn't explain was Ethan. He had always been a quiet child, thoughtful beyond his years, adapted remarkably well to his blindness. He navigated their previous apartment with confidence, memorizing every corner, every piece of furniture. But here, in this house, he moved differently. He would stop in doorways and tilt his head, as if listening to something no one else could hear. He would reach out and touch walls with both palms, standing perfectly still for minutes at a time. When Sarah asked him what he was doing, he simply said, "They're showing me." "Who's showing you, sweetheart?" "The men." Sarah exchanged glances with her husband, David. Children had imaginary friends. That was normal. Ethan's world was different from other children's. He experienced things through sound, through touch, through imagination. Of course he would create companions. But the German, that came later. That came on a Tuesday night in late September, when the first frost touched the ground and the house seemed to exhale something cold and ancient. Sarah was putting Ethan to bed, tucking the blankets around him, humming softly. He was drifting off when his hand suddenly shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was strong, too strong for a 6-year-old. His blind eyes were wide open, and his mouth moved, forming words in a language she didn't understand. Harsh consonants, clipped syllables, German. She recognized the sound of it from old war films, but nothing more. Ethan spoke for 30 seconds straight, his voice flat, emotionless, reciting something with the cadence of a military report. Then he released her wrist and fell asleep instantly, his breathing soft and even. Sarah stood there, her heart hammering, staring at her son. She backed out of the room slowly, closed the door, and went downstairs to where David was working on his laptop. "We need to record him," she said. "What?" "Ethan. He just spoke German, fluent German, like he's done it his whole life." David looked up from his screen, his expression skeptical. "Sarah, he probably heard something on TV, or he's blind, David. He doesn't watch TV. And even if he did, this wasn't a cartoon. This was military. It sounded like orders, like a briefing." That night they set up a baby monitor with a camera in Ethan's room. They needed to know. They needed to see if it would happen again. For 3 nights, nothing. Ethan slept peacefully. Sarah began to wonder if she had imagined it, if exhaustion and the strangeness of the new house had played tricks on her mind. But on the 4th night, at exactly 3:14 in the morning, the monitor crackled to life. Ethan sat up in bed, rigid, mechanical. His head turned toward the camera as if he knew it was there. His mouth opened, and he began to speak. German again, longer this time, more detailed. Sarah and David huddled over the monitor, listening, recording, their skin prickling with cold dread. Ethan's voice was different, deeper, older. He spoke for 7 minutes straight, never pausing, never stumbling over a word. Then he lay back down and went silent. Sarah played the recording back 3 times before she made the decision. They needed help, professional help, not a priest, not a paranormal investigator, a psychologist, someone who specialized in children, in trauma, in memory. Dr. Miriam Kellner had been practicing child psychology for 23 years. She had seen cases of trauma-induced regression, false memory syndrome, dissociative disorders. She had worked with children who claimed to remember past lives, though in every case she had been able to trace the memories back to something they had seen or heard, books, movies, stories told by relatives. She approached Ethan's case with clinical detachment. The parents were articulate, educated, clearly concerned, but not hysterical. They showed her the recordings. She listened to the German, made notes, and scheduled the first session. Ethan arrived on a cold October morning, led by his mother's hand. He was small for his age, with pale skin and white blonde hair that fell across his sightless eyes. He sat in the chair across from Dr. Kellner and folded his hands in his lap, perfectly still, waiting. "Hello, Ethan," Dr. Kellner said gently. "My name is Miriam. Your parents tell me you've been having some interesting dreams." "They're not dreams," Ethan said immediately. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "Dreams go away when you wake up. This doesn't. Can you tell me what you see?" "I don't see. I'm blind." "I apologize. Can you tell me what you experience?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. "I hear them. I feel them. I know their names." "Who are they?" "My unit." Dr. Kellner's pen paused over her notepad. "Your unit?" "2nd Panzer Division, 7th Company. We were stationed outside Bastogne in December 1944. The snow was 3 feet deep. We hadn't eaten in 2 days. The Americans were dug in, and we knew the orders were coming. We knew we were going to die." The room went silent except for the soft hum of the heating system. Dr. Kellner stared at the child in front of her, 6 years old, blind, speaking with the calm precision of a veteran recounting battlefield memories. She glanced at Sarah, who sat pale and rigid in the corner. Dr. Kellner cleared her throat. "Ethan, where did you learn about World War II?" "I didn't learn. I remember." "Do your parents talk about the war at home?" "No." "Have you heard audiobooks, podcasts, radio programs?" "No." "Then how—" "I told you. I remember. Because I was there. My name was Franz Kohler. I was 19 years old. I died on December 16th, 1944, at 3:14 in the morning, when an American shell hit our trench. But I didn't die alone. There were 6 others with me. Dieter, Klaus, Wilhelm, Johann, Stefan, Otto. We all died together, and we're still there." Dr. Kellner requested permission to record the sessions. Sarah and David agreed immediately. They needed answers, needed someone else to witness what was happening, needed proof that they weren't losing their minds. The second session took place 4 days later. This time, Dr. Kellner brought a colleague, Dr. Robert Hayes, a psychiatrist specializing in dissociative disorders and trauma. She also brought something else, a German translator. The translator's name was Hendrik Moss, a retired professor of Germanic languages who had worked with military historians for decades. He sat quietly in the corner with headphones, listening to the recordings from Ethan's bedroom, his face growing paler with each passing minute. When Ethan entered the room, Hendrik stared at him with unconcealed shock. "That's impossible," Hendrik whispered to Dr. Kellner. "That child is speaking Hochdeutsch with a Bavarian dialect. Specifically, the dialect spoken in the 1940s. It's not modern German. It's historically precise, down to slang terms that haven't been used in 80 years. Dr. Kellner felt her skepticism begin to crack. She had expected to find a rational explanation, a source, a contamination of information, but this was something else. She turned to Ethan, who sat with his hands folded, his blind eyes aimed at nothing and everything. "Ethan," she began carefully, "I'd like you to tell me more about Franz, about his life before the war." Ethan nodded slowly. He grew up in a village called Oberammergau. His father was a wood carver. His mother died when he was 8. He had a younger sister named Greta. He wanted to be a teacher, but the war came. He was conscripted in 1943. He didn't want to fight. None of them did. But you didn't have a choice. If you refused, they shot you. Or worse, they went after your family. What do you remember about the battle? Everything. Ethan's voice dropped. The cold, the hunger, the way your fingers stopped working when you tried to reload your rifle, the sound of the artillery. It wasn't like thunder, it was sharper, more personal, like the air itself was being torn apart. We knew the offensive was coming. The officers told us it was our last chance to push the Americans back, but we knew the truth. We were going to die, all of us. You said you died with 6 others. Can you tell me their full names? Without hesitation, Ethan recited Dieter Schultz, Klaus Becker, Wilhelm Adler, Johann Fischer, Stefan Hartmann, Otto Brandt, all from different parts of Germany, all in the same trench when the shell hit. Dr. Hayes leaned forward. Ethan, when you remember these things, do you feel like you're watching a movie? Or do you feel like it's happening to you? It is me. I am Franz. I was Franz. I'm still Franz, but I'm also Ethan. It's like living in 2 places at the same time. When I'm awake, I'm mostly Ethan, but at night I'm Franz again. I'm back in the trench, and they're all there with me, waiting. Waiting for what? Ethan turned his head toward Dr. Hayes, his white eyes unnervingly focused. For me to come back, because I left them there. After the session, Dr. Kellner and Hendrik spent 3 hours cross-referencing the information Ethan had provided. Names, locations, dates, military units. Hendrik had access to digital archives, to declassified German military records, to databases maintained by historians and genealogists. What they found made the air in the room feel thin and electric. Franz Kohler existed, born March 1925 in Oberammergau, Bavaria. Father, Georg Kohler, woodcarver. Mother, Anna Kohler, deceased, 1933. Sister, Greta Kohler. Franz was conscripted in June 1943 and assigned to the 2nd Panzer Division, 7th Company. He was reported missing in action on December 16, 1944, near Bastogne, Belgium. No body recovered, no confirmed death, just a name on a list of the missing. But that wasn't the part that made Hendrik's hands shake as he typed. It was the others: Dieter Schultz, Klaus Becker, Wilhelm Adler, Johann Fischer, Stefan Hartmann, Otto Brandt. Every single name Ethan had recited existed in the same records, same unit, same date, all missing, all presumed dead, no bodies recovered, 7 soldiers, all in the same trench, all erased from existence in a single moment. How could he know this? Hendrik whispered. These aren't famous soldiers. These aren't names you find in history books. This is archived military data, classified until 15 years ago. How could a blind 6-year-old in Pennsylvania know the full names of 7 missing German soldiers? Dr. Kellner had no answer. She sat in silence, staring at the screen, at the names, at the impossible evidence in front of her. Dr. Hayes broke the silence. We need to go further. We need to ask him things that can't be verified through records, personal details, things that only someone who was there would know. The 3rd session was different, darker. Dr. Kellner asked Ethan to describe the moment of the explosion, to recount the last minutes of Franz Kohler's life. Ethan's face went blank, his small body perfectly still. When he spoke, his voice had changed. It was hollow, distant, as if he were speaking from the bottom of a well. We heard the whistle first, that's how you knew. The shells made a sound before they hit, a high-pitched scream. We had maybe 3 seconds. Dieter tried to run. Klaus grabbed him and pulled him down. Wilhelm was praying. Johann was crying. Stefan just stared at the sky. Otto was holding a photograph of his wife. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. And then the world exploded. Fire, dirt, metal, pain everywhere. I couldn't hear anymore, couldn't see. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't work. There was something warm running down my face. Blood. I knew I was dying. I could feel it, like falling asleep, but colder. And then, nothing. Darkness. But not the kind of darkness when you close your eyes. The kind that swallows you whole. And then I wasn't alone anymore. They were there. All 6 of them. We were standing in the trench. But the trench was different. Empty. Frozen. Like a photograph that never changes. And we've been there ever since. Dr. Kellner felt a chill crawl up her spine. You're saying their souls are trapped there. We didn't know how to leave. We died together. And we stayed together for 80 years. Until I found a way out. How did you get out? Ethan's head tilted, his blind eyes reflecting the overhead light. I was born again. The case became an obsession. Dr. Kellner stopped taking new patients. She dedicated every waking hour to Ethan, to verifying his claims, to searching for any rational explanation that would make sense of the impossible. She contacted military historians in Germany, in Belgium, in the United States. She reached out to genealogists, to archivists, to veterans organizations. She needed to know if there was any way Ethan could have accessed this information, any possible contamination, any forgotten documentary, any overheard conversation. She found nothing. The Richardson family had no German ancestry, no military history, no connection to World War II beyond what every American family might have through general history education. David worked in IT. Sarah was a nurse. They lived quiet lives. They didn't collect war memorabilia. They didn't watch history channels. There was no source, no origin point, just Ethan and his memories. Dr. Hayes took a different approach. He focused on the psychological mechanics. If Ethan genuinely believed he was the reincarnation of Franz Kohler, where did that belief come from? Past life memories were a documented phenomenon, though widely disputed. Most cases involved children between the ages of 2 and 7. Most memories faded by adolescence, and most, when investigated, could be traced back to cryptomnesia, hidden memories, information absorbed unconsciously and later retrieved as if it were original. But Ethan's case was different. The level of detail, the historical accuracy, the language. Dr. Hayes began reading everything he could find on reincarnation studies. University of Virginia had an entire division dedicated to it. Thousands of cases documented, some with verified details, some truly unexplainable. He contacted Dr. Jim Tucker, who had spent decades researching children who claimed past life memories. Dr. Tucker agreed to review Ethan's case. His response came 3 days later. This is one of the strongest cases I've encountered. The specificity of verifiable details, combined with the linguistic anomaly, puts it in a category of fewer than 20 cases worldwide. If this child had no access to the information he's providing, we're looking at something extraordinary. But extraordinary wasn't enough. Dr. Kellner needed more. She needed something definitive, something that would prove beyond any doubt that Ethan was accessing genuine memories. That's when she had the idea, the photographs. If Franz Kohler's family still existed, if any records survived, there might be photographs. Images of the men in his unit, faces Ethan had never seen. Faces no one alive had seen in 80 years. Hendrik spent 2 weeks tracking down descendants. Most trails were cold. Germany had been shattered by war, records destroyed, families scattered across continents. But he found one. Greta Kohler, Franz's younger sister, had survived the war. She married in 1950, moved to Hamburg, had 3 children. She died in 2003, but her daughter Ingrid was still alive. Ingrid was 74 years old and living in a care facility outside Munich. Hendrik called her, explained the situation, asked if any family photographs still existed. Ingrid's voice was cautious, confused, but she agreed to look. 1 week later, a package arrived at Dr. Kellner's office. Inside were 6 photographs, faded, yellowed with age. 5 of them were family photos, Franz as a child, Franz with his sister, Franz standing outside a small wooden house. But the 6th photograph was different. It showed 7 young men in German military uniforms standing in front of a half-track vehicle, snow visible on the ground behind them. On the back, written in faded ink, were 7 names: Franz Kohler, Dieter Schulz, Klaus Becker, Wilhelm Adler, Johann Fischer, Stefan Hartmann, Otto Brandt. Dr. Kellner stared at the photograph for a long time. These were the faces. The men Ethan spoke about. The men he claimed to remember. She made copies of each face, isolated them, removed the names, and created a test. She printed 20 photographs. 13 were random German soldiers from the same era, pulled from public archives. 7 were the men from Ethan's unit. She mixed them together, numbered them 1 through 20, and prepared for the next session. Ethan arrived on a cold November afternoon. The trees outside were bare, skeletal against a grey sky. Dr. Kellner explained what she was going to do. She would describe each photograph to him: height, build, facial features, hair, expression. She would give him as much detail as possible, and she would ask him if he recognized them, if he remembered them. She started with the control photographs, the random soldiers. Ethan listened carefully to each description, shook his head. "No, I don't know him." 13 times he said no. Then she reached photograph 14. She described the face: square jaw, high cheekbones, light-colored eyes. A slight smile. Ethan went rigid. "Dieter," he whispered. "That's Dieter Schulz. He was 21. He used to sing. Even when we were freezing and starving, he'd sing these old folk songs. He annoyed everyone, but we loved him for it." Dr. Kellner's hands trembled as she moved to the next photograph. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Ethan identified all 7 perfectly. Not a single mistake. He named them, described their personalities, recounted specific moments. Klaus was quiet but brave. Wilhelm was religious, always praying. Johann was the youngest, barely 18, terrified but trying to hide it. Stefan was cynical, always making dark jokes. Otto had a wife and a newborn daughter he never got to meet. And Franz, the one Ethan claimed to have been. Dr. Kellner showed him the photograph last. She described Franz Kohler's face in detail. Ethan listened in silence. When she finished, he reached out with both hands. "Can I touch it?" She placed the photograph in his hands. Ethan's fingers moved across the surface, tracing the outline, as if he could feel the image beneath his fingertips. His face crumpled, tears spilled from his sightless eyes. "That's me," he whispered. "That's who I was." After the photograph test, something shifted. Ethan's episodes became more frequent, more intense. He woke up every single night at 3:14, speaking in German, recounting the same moments over and over. The cold, the fear, the explosion. Sarah and David were exhausted, terrified. They didn't know what to do. Dr. Kellner suggested a specialist, someone who worked with trauma, with PTSD. Even if the memories weren't real, Ethan was experiencing them as real, and the psychological toll was becoming dangerous. But before they could schedule the appointment, something else happened. Something that pushed the case into territory no one was prepared for. It started with the drawings. Ethan had never drawn before. He was blind. He had no concept of visual representation, but one night Sarah found him in his room, sitting at his small desk, his fingers moving across a blank piece of paper. He wasn't using a pencil. He wasn't using a crayon. He was using his fingertips, pressing them into the paper, moving in slow, deliberate patterns. Sarah watched in silence, her heart pounding. When Ethan finished, he sat back, his hands falling to his lap. Sarah stepped forward and picked up the paper. Her breath caught. The paper was covered in indentations, finger marks pressed deep enough to leave visible outlines, and those outlines formed a face. Rough, abstract, but unmistakably a face. Sarah took the paper downstairs and held it up to the light. The face became clearer. She compared it to the photographs Dr. Kellner had given them. Her blood turned cold. It was Dieter Schulz. Ethan had drawn Dieter's face, without sight, without guidance. From memory, over the next 2 weeks, Ethan drew 5 more faces, all in the same way, all in the dark, all pressed into the paper with his fingertips. Klaus, Wilhelm, Johann, Stefan, Otto. Every single face matched the photographs. Dr. Kellner brought in a forensic artist, someone who specialized in facial reconstruction. The artist examined the drawings, compared them to the historical photographs, and delivered her conclusion. These are the same individuals. The proportions are accurate. The features match. I don't know how he did this, but these are not random sketches. These are portraits. Dr. Hayes had no explanation. Dr. Kellner had no explanation. Hendrik suggested they contact the University of Virginia, escalate the case to a higher level of scrutiny. But before they could make the call, the manifestations began. It started with sounds. David heard them first. Footsteps in the hallway at night. Heavy, deliberate, military boots on hardwood. He searched the house 3 times, found nothing. Then Sarah heard voices, whispers in a language she didn't understand. German, multiple voices, coming from Ethan's room. But when she opened the door, Ethan was alone, asleep. The whispers stopped the moment she entered. The temperature drops became more pronounced. The upstairs hallway was always freezing now, no matter how high they turned the heat. Frost formed on the inside of Ethan's window, even though it was only November. And then the shadows. Sarah saw them first, shapes moving at the edge of her vision, tall, human-shaped, standing in doorways, watching. When she turned to look directly, they vanished, but she could feel them, a presence, multiple presences. David saw them too. He didn't say anything at first, didn't want to frighten Sarah more than she already was. But one night he woke up at 3:14 and saw 7 figures standing at the foot of their bed. Soldiers, dressed in German uniforms, faces pale, eyes hollow, staring, not moving, just watching. He tried to scream, nothing came out. He tried to move, his body wouldn't respond. The figures stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, they turned and walked out of the room, through the wall. David didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Dr. Kellner didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in hauntings. She was a scientist, a psychologist. But when Sarah called her, sobbing, begging for help, she agreed to come to the house. She needed to see for herself. She arrived on a Friday evening just after sunset. The house felt wrong the moment she stepped inside. Oppressive, heavy, like the air itself was pushing down on her. She set up recording equipment in the hallway, in Ethan's room, in the master bedroom. Cameras, audio recorders, EMF detectors. She didn't know what she expected to find, but she needed data. She needed something concrete. That night, she sat in the living room with Sarah and David, waiting. At 3:14 in the morning, every device in the house activated simultaneously. The cameras recorded shadows moving through the hallway, shapes with no source. The audio recorders captured voices, German, multiple voices, speaking over each other. The EMF detectors spiked to levels that should have been impossible in a residential home. And upstairs, in Ethan's room, the boy sat up in bed and began to speak. But this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was 7. 7 different voices, all coming from Ethan's mouth, all speaking at once, all recounting the same moment. The explosion, the death, the darkness. Dr. Kellner ran upstairs, her hands shaking. She burst into the room and saw Ethan standing in the center, his arms outstretched, his blind eyes wide open. And around him, flickering in and out of visibility, were 7 figures. Soldiers. Translucent, barely there, but present, real. Dr. Kellner froze. Her scientific mind screamed that this was impossible, but her eyes, her ears, her entire body told her otherwise. The figures turned toward her, all 7 of them, and in unison they spoke. Hilf uns, help us. Dr. Kellner spent the entire weekend researching, not psychology, not medicine, something else. Hauntings, attachments, spiritual phenomena. She contacted paranormal researchers, mediums, people she would have dismissed as charlatans a month ago, but she was out of options. Science had failed, logic had failed. Ethan wasn't just remembering a past life. He was connected to something, 7 somethings, 7 souls that had been trapped for 80 years, and somehow, impossibly, they had found their way to him. One name kept appearing in her research: Father Marcus Brennan, a Jesuit priest who specialized in cases of spiritual attachment and trauma. He had worked with the Vatican's team of exorcists, but had left the church to pursue independent research. He didn't believe in demonic possession. He believed in souls, lost souls, trapped souls, souls that couldn't move on because something held them in place: trauma, guilt, unfinished business. Dr. Kellner called him, explained the case, sent him the recordings. Father Brennan listened in silence. When she finished, he said one thing: "I'll be there tomorrow." Father Brennan arrived on Monday morning. He was in his 60s, tall and thin, with grey hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. He brought nothing with him except a small leather bag. No holy water, no crosses, just a notebook and a recorder. He sat down with Ethan in the living room. Sarah and David watched from the doorway. Dr. Kellner stood nearby, arms crossed, skeptical but desperate. "Ethan," Father Brennan said gently, "I'd like to talk to Franz." Ethan's face went blank. His posture shifted. When he spoke, his voice was deeper, older. "You can see us, can't you? I can sense you. Yes, all 7 of you. You've been with this boy for a long time. Since he was born. We didn't mean to. We didn't know how. We were just looking for a way out. And then we felt him, a soul being born, a doorway. We tried to reach it, and we got through. But we brought too much with us. The memories, the pain, the death. We infected him with our past. Why haven't you moved on?" Franz's voice, speaking through Ethan, cracked. "Because we left them behind. Our bodies, our brothers. We died together, but we weren't buried together. We weren't honored. We weren't remembered. We were just erased, and we couldn't let go. We've been standing in that trench for 80 years, waiting for someone to find us, to bring us home." Father Brennan leaned forward. "The boy is not your home. He's a child. He's innocent. You're hurting him." "We know. We don't want to. But we don't know how to leave. We're tied to the place we died, and we're tied to him. He's the only living thing that can feel us, that can hear us. Then you need to let him go. You need to find peace. We can't. Not until someone finds us. Not until someone knows we existed." Father Brennan sat back, his mind working. This wasn't an exorcism. This was something else entirely. A rescue, not of the living, but of the dead. He turned to Dr. Kellner. "We need to go to Belgium, to Bastogne, to the place where they died. If their remains are still there, if there's any trace of them, we might be able to break the connection, give them what they need. Recognition, acknowledgement, peace." The trip was arranged within a week. Dr. Kellner, Father Brennan, and Hendrik Moss flew to Belgium. Sarah and David wanted to bring Ethan, but Father Brennan strongly advised against it. The boy was already fragile. Taking him to the site of the trauma could shatter him completely. They landed in Brussels and drove to Bastogne, a small town in the Ardennes, still marked by the scars of war. Memorials dotted the landscape. Museums preserved the history, but the forests, the fields, the trenches had long since been reclaimed by nature. Hendrik had coordinates, approximate locations based on military records and Ethan's descriptions. They hired a local guide, a historian who specialized in the Battle of the Bulge. His name was Luc Fontaine, and he had spent 40 years mapping the battlefield, locating lost positions, recovering artifacts. When Hendrik explained what they were looking for, Luc's expression darkened. "The trench you're describing is in a restricted area. The land was never fully cleared. There are still unexploded shells buried there. It's too dangerous. We have to try," Dr. Kellner said. "A child's life depends on it." Luc stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll take you. But we go carefully, and if I say we stop, we stop." They set out at dawn. The forest was dense, the ground uneven, covered in dead leaves and frost. Luc led them through narrow paths, past rusted metal fragments, past markers indicating dangerous zones. After 2 hours, they reached a clearing. Luke stopped and pointed. There, that depression in the ground, that was a trench line, German position, overrun on December 16th, 1944. Multiple casualties. No bodies recovered due to the chaos of the battle. Dr. Kellner felt her pulse quicken. She walked forward slowly, Hendrik and Father Brennan following. The ground was uneven, collapsed in places where the trench had caved in over the decades. She knelt down and placed her hand on the cold earth. Hendrik took out a small metal detector, something Luke had brought. He swept it slowly over the area. After a few minutes, it beeped. Loud, insistent. He looked at Luke. There's something here. Metal. Deep. Luke hesitated, then nodded. We dig. Carefully. They used small tools, trowels, brushes. It took 3 hours, and then Hendrik's trowel struck something solid. He brushed away the dirt and froze. It was a helmet. German. Covered in rust and dirt, but unmistakable. He kept digging, and then he found the first bone. A femur. Human. Old. Buried for 80 years. They stopped. Called the authorities. Within hours, the Belgian military arrived, along with forensic teams. The site was secured. Over the next week, they excavated the area. They found 7 sets of remains, 7 German soldiers buried together in a collapsed trench, and with them, personal effects, dog tags, identification discs, names: Franz Kohler, Dieter Schulz, Klaus Becker, Wilhelm Adler, Johann Fischer, Stefan Hartmann, Otto Brandt, all 7, exactly where Ethan said they would be. Back in Pennsylvania, the moment the remains were identified, something changed. Ethan woke up at 3:14 that night, but he didn't speak German. He didn't cry. He simply sat up, smiled and whispered, "They're going home." The shadows disappeared. The cold vanished. The house felt light again, normal. Sarah and David cried with relief. Dr. Kellner received a call from Father Brennan. "It's over, they've been found. They can rest now." Ethan stopped having the episodes, stopped speaking German. The memories faded slowly, like a dream slipping away. Dr. Kellner continued to monitor him for months. By the time he turned 7, Ethan had no recollection of Franz Kohler or the soldiers. He remembered only fragments, strange dreams, feelings he couldn't explain. He was, finally, just a child. The remains of the 7 soldiers were returned to Germany and buried with full military honors in a cemetery in Bavaria. Greta Kohler's descendants attended. Ingrid stood at the grave of her uncle, a man she had never known, and wept. Dr. Kellner attended as well. She stood in silence, watching the coffins being lowered into the ground, and wondered about the nature of memory, of trauma, of souls. She had no answers, only questions. But she knew one thing. Ethan had given 7 lost men what they desperately needed. Someone to remember them, someone to bring them home, and in doing so, he had freed himself. The case was never published. No academic paper, no media coverage. Dr. Kellner kept the recordings, the photographs, the evidence locked away. Some things she decided were too strange, too fragile to expose to the world. But on quiet nights, when she sat alone in her office, she would listen to the recordings again. To Ethan's voice speaking German, to the 7 voices speaking through him, and she would remember the words Father Brennan had told her. The living and the dead are not as separate as we think. Sometimes they need each other.